Imagine a powerful wizard woman shows up in your village and was like, hey, you guys gotta go. And on your way out, she tells you, you know nothing about this place that you've lived your entire life. The Wheel of Time opened with a few bonus episodes, and the most recent one was on Manetheren, which is the home of our characters from the Two Rivers. We are going to be breaking down the bonus content, talking a little bit about it, and expanding. And this episode will be spoiler free. I'm starting out, and I ended up, Tracy, I think, where they start saying Karai on Kalazar.
There are phrases throughout the Wheel of Time that just they
Getcha?
hit you. This is one.
Yeah.
And I was actually listening to our
Mhm.
Manetheren 101 episode, and that was the quote that we started it out with. And so I was listening to you do the
Karai on
Karai.
Kalazar. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And I just love it so much. I am so thankful that they did this for Manetheren. I love the story of Manetheren. I think the visuals they made for this are gorgeous, and I'm really excited to talk about it today,
Should
if
we
you
get
will.
started?
Yes, you're
Okay.
starting.
We are given this animation starting out, and the narrator is telling us that this battle of Manetheren happened 1,000 years after the breaking of the world. On our first video, we talked a little bit about the breaking of the world, actually, a lot about it. And so, if you want more information on that, go back. It's spoiler
Mhm.
free as well. This battle is taking place during the Trolloc Wars, and we're shown this beautiful city kind of resting up against a rocky cliffside. We get images of a king and his armies running into battle against Trollocs, Shadow Spawn, Dreadlords. This is the Trolloc War. So King Aemon is our hero in this animated clip. You can see him taking on and battling all these Shadow Spawn with his men. This battle lasted days, and the narrator tells us that King Aemon defended his people with everything that he had. So
Mhm.
the days and nights continue, and he and his men are holding the Tarangel River. This is just a massive feat. They did it alone. What I actually really love with this animated video is in the opening, there's eagles flying across the screen,
Mhm.
and we know that the flag of Manetheren is the red eagle.
Mhm.
So King Aemon and his men keep fighting, keep battling, and they just won't retreat.
Mhm.
They eventually fall. As King Aemon is being attacked and shot with arrows, you hear him repeating Karai on Kalazar, which we can talk about a little bit later. And then I think Tracy is going to talk more about where we're at in the video.
Yes. So, from the point where Amber ended, there's a swarm of Trollocs that stream past the screen, flashes of battle with men, horses, and Trollocs fighting to the death. King Aemon is seen from behind, arrows poking out of his body, staring at his home, knowing his wife is there, knowing he is dying. The sword that could not be broken was shattered. A back and forth expression of loss between the king and queen is shared before the scene changes to a Trolloc holding up the crown of the king of Manetheren. Queen Eldrine is shown, hair blown by the wind, face fallen with grief, and the flows of the One Power are shown to gather around her as she burns herself out to destroy the remaining Trolloc armies. And so her heart and kingdom found their end. Light burns through Manetheren and obliterates the land around it. A raven flies across the landscape. I thought it was a raven, but I like yours as an eagle better. So I'm going to go with that. An
Well,
eagle flies
it
across
could
the
be
landscape. It
either.
could be either.
We know
Yeah,
ravens are agents of the dark, so
exactly, that's kind of why I felt that it was, and I
mhm.
mean, we could probably also talk about raven versus eagles a little bit too.
Yeah.
However, um, so a raven flies across the landscape again, healed with the passage of time and now known as the Two Rivers. A young boy is pulling a crown from the river, the crown of King Aemon. The old blood sings in the Two Rivers.
Dun, da, da,
Ba
da.
Wasn't that was so much more concise this time, right? I wrote
Yes,
it
it
out.
was. So
I'm clapping for myself.
in the books, we learn the majority of what we know about Manetheren from Moraine Damajard
Yes.
when she enters the Two Rivers. And she tells our young folk about the city that they're from. It was a nation that was destroyed. They're shocked. They don't know their own history. And
Mhm,
Moraine tells it to them, which is a big comparison and maybe a little bit different than how it worked on the TV show.
mhm,
They're singing the song about weeping for Manetheren, so it kind of almost sounds like they have an idea about it,
mhm,
and then Moraine kind of comes in and fills in the gaps. I'm gonna start out talking about the Trolloc War because this is kind of the backdrop for this story,
mhm,
and this is after the breaking of the world.
mhm,
This Trolloc War sounds pretty much like exactly what it is.
mhm,
The Trollocs start coming down from the borderlands, and this is where the fighting starts.
mhm,
So I believe one of the first nations to fall was Mafar Daranel, and this is actually up in the north where current day Faldara is.
mhm.
And we will see Faldara, I think, in episode 7. Very
Oh, why do
excited.
I have to wait that
I know.
long?
So just keep that in mind
Can I
when
just sleep until episode 7
yes,
shows up? I'm
yes.
sorry, just kidding.
So just keep that in mind that when Mafar Daranel is mentioned, this
Mhm,
is the ancient birthplace, I guess, of Faldara, and it's
mhm,
special. It was an
mhm,
Ogier-built city like Tarvalon, like Shadar Logoth. So after the city falls, these 10 nations band together and decide,
mhm.
hey, like we've got to fight and we've got to do it all together. Otherwise, we don't
Mhm,
stand a chance. So they band together. And later on, another very important nation falls. And this nation is called Eridhall,
mhm,
or a country,
mhm.
and or kingdom. Kingdom.
I believe it's the Kingdom of
Yeah.
Aerodol. Mhm,
So Eridhall falls, and you will know the name Eridhall by what it is called now. We've seen it in the TV show, and Eridhall is actually Shadar Logoth.
it was so
So,
good.
yes,
It was so good.
there is a bit of a backstory on Eridhall. We're not going to get too much into it today. I don't want to tread too close to any spoilers.
Mhm,
So I'm just gonna say that Eridhall betrays Manetheren. So
mhm.
just we'll leave it at that.
The full political spectrum of what happened is actually covered in our Manetheren episode for anybody who wants to get into it. I know I listened to it again and was like, "Wow, that's cool."
Yeah, you can find a link to our podcast on our website or on the YouTube page. But that's
Yeah.
a really fun episode. And
Yes.
it'll
Manetheren
be
is
much
fascinating.
more in depth than
Mhm.
today.
Yeah.
So Eridhall falls eventually, and King Aemon takes his strongest warriors to Manetheren to the forefront of the biggest battle that's happening. And his army has an elite band of fighters known as the Band of the Red Hand. Keep
Mhm.
this in your head because it is very important later on. And
Yes,
it
it
is
is.
very cool.
Very cool.
So people from all over would actually come to Manetheren to join this fighting group. It was
Mhm.
very well known, very dangerous.
Mhm.
As all this is going on, we saw in the video that eventually King Aemon's forces fall, and his band of warriors, the Band of the Red Hand, are the very last ones to go down.
Yeah.
In the history books and the lore of the Wheel of Time, Manetheren is also described as a thorn to the Dark One's foot and to
Mhm.
his hand.
Mhm. To whatever part may be tender,
Exactly.
apply Manetheren.
Yeah. So I think the next thing to maybe talk about is a little bit on our King Aemon and
Mhm.
his wife, Queen Eldrine.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna start with Queen Eldrine because I love her. She's a
Mhm.
very interesting story. And she was portrayed a little bit different than I thought. I was expecting golden hair.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she's known to have golden hair.
Oh, okay. I I must have missed that point.
Well, anyways.
So sorry. So sorry. Please continue. I'm enjoying this.
Okay, so Queen Eldrine was actually a tower-trained Aes Sedai, and King Aemon was her warder-bonded husband. So Queen Eldrine was known for exceptional strength. In her time, she was the strongest female channeler that lived,
Yeah.
which makes her very formidable. And on top of that, she was so beloved by her people of Manetheren. They called her Elisande, which meant the rose of the sun in the Old Tongue, and they would even invoke her name during battle. So on this video, when the king is repeating Karai on Kalazar, he's chanting this war cry that involves his wife's, I guess, her nickname, kind of like her
Mhm.
beloved nickname from her people.
Mhm.
So Eldrine spends time in the tower as a novice and she meets another woman named Tetsuan. How do you say it?
Tetsuan. I always say it Tetsuan.
Okay, Tetsuan it is.
Tetsuan it is.
So this woman becomes increasingly jealous of Eldrine, and this is before she's a queen.
Mhm.
Eldrine eventually parts ways with the White Tower, and she is now the queen of Manetheren.
Mhm.
So now we're going to switch back to King Aemon.
Mhm.
And what's interesting about him is he's just this massive guy. Like he's huge. He's like 6 foot military strategist, very courageous. He has this immense love for his wife that is basically kind of like written down by word of mouth. Like
Yeah.
if you know about King Aemon, you know about his love for his
For his
wife, the
wife.
Queen Eldrine.
It's so
So
touching. It's so touching.
yeah,
I love it.
there are some
Mm.
theories on the internet that one of our Wheel of Time characters is actually King Aemon reborn.
Mhm.
That's really
I
fun.
love that idea.
Yeah.
I love it so much.
Yes,
I
so
just
do
do.
I.
Mhm.
So, King Aemon has grouped his military, the Band of the Red Hand in Manetheren, and if we go back to the fighting, he's dealt another betrayal. So first it was Eredhall, and now we have another betrayal that comes from a very unlikely source.
And one not mentioned in this little telling here.
This is something that I really thought that they would cover on. Maybe they're waiting later. Maybe they don't want to
Mm,
bog
mhm.
people down with too much information, but I
Well,
think it's very important.
I have kind of a bit of a thought on that.
Yeah.
Um, so these are stories being told, and
Mhm.
as we've mentioned before, the victor is the one who writes the story. So perhaps at this point, Tetsuan's role in what happened is potentially just being kind of
Glazed
clipped
over?
out. Yeah, it's been edited out of the story. Possibly. Like,
Well,
that's my little theory. By the way, this little movie is so fun.
I just
I keep,
like that
like, sitting
it
I just keep
goes.
sitting here, like, gazing at it like, "Oh, I love it. It looks great. But
I
let's
just
talk about Tetsuan because I don't know if we've, like, fully gotten into her, and I've just, like, gone off on a ramble.
So if we back up just a little bit, King Aemon sends his fastest riders begging for aid. Now, Tetsuan has actually become the Amerlin seat at this
Mhm.
point. When
Mhm.
word reaches her about Manetheren needing aid, she sends
Sorry,
Trace.
this petty bitch. Okay, continue.
She receives word and agrees to send help. And she tells King Aemon, wait 3 days and help will arrive. Well, King Aemon is on the battlefield, it's raging, and he waits for 3 days and no one comes. He waits another day, and then on the fourth day, King Aemon knows that he was definitely betrayed. So this war rages on 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, 8 days, 9 days. And on the ninth day, he sends his riders to Manetheren to evacuate the city.
Yeah.
On the 10th day, it is told in the history books of this world in the Wheel of Time that King Aemon made a final desperate defense, and on this 10th day, civilians began to arrive on the battlefield. They started trickling in at first, and then thousands came to stand with the army and Aemon's men to pay the price for their homeland.
Mm.
And like this is rough stuff. This is probably one of these moments in the Wheel of Time lore that really pulls at your heartstrings.
It's a
So,
great story. It's a
yeah.
great story.
So when we hear in our current time, present time, during our Wheel of Time story in the television series and in the books, when we're talking about people in the third age, we hear a lot of we're strong two rivers folk.
We're two
And
rivers folk.
yeah,
We
and
got this.
they're known for their stubbornness and coming to the aid of others and
Mhm.
helping out and being a real tight knit community. And
Mhm.
it's kind of just said, well, the old blood of Manetheren runs deep in the two rivers. And we see
Yeah.
that on our first episode.
Mhm.
So it eventually ends up with Queen Eldrine feeling the loss of her beloved husband through the water bond,
Mm.
and she just goes supernova and destroys all the shadow spawn in a radius of Manetheren, but also the entire nation.
Yeah.
So everything is destroyed. There were survivors. I'm not sure if it was young children or the elderly, but there were people that were tucked away, hidden
Mhm.
from the fighting. And these are the ancestors of our Two Rivers characters.
Yep. That's yep. I have the best commentary. Um, I really don't know what more
you,
to add to that,
you got nothing?
truthfully. Okay, so stylistically for this
Hmm.
particular clip, this is my favorite one that they've had so far.
Oh, okay. I
I love it.
I love King Aemon, the feathered shoulder pieces that he's wearing to
His
signify, like, the
crown,
eagle of Manetheren.
yeah, everything
It's
has, like, kind of a upward motion. I mean, I think it's don't mind me. I think it's fairly similar to
Valdaran soldiers.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking too, how they had it kind of like worked into their armor as well, which I think is such a beautiful touch. Like everything about this is so beautifully detailed. Even the fact that his crown is not just a crown, it's like a helmet. He's got chainmail still protecting the sides of his face. Like he's a
the
warrior, and I love it.
what's interesting about King Aemon's crown and the animation, it almost looks stylistically like they pulled from the architecture of the Ogier-built cities. So
I
there's
like
kind of
that.
that lattice-shaped
Mhm.
weave interweaving kind of it.
Mhm.
And if we talk about Manetheren, it was this great Ogier built city. So
Mhm.
there's even legends about Ogier coming from all over the world just to stare
Just
at it.
there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like it was
Mhm.
that cool.
Yeah, I that's just one of those things that's, like, built into the lore of the
Mhm.
Wheel of Time books that I just so many details, so many details.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things about this for me is how closely it touched to, like, the look and style of some of the original artwork for the books, where
Okay.
like, in particular, there's a scene in this little clip that you created for us. Also, Manetheren looks exactly like I imagined it. This part
It's
right here, this scene. This makes me think of, like, one of the book excerpts from, like, I think maybe it's A Crown of Swords, where it's very similar to this, and so I love that they kinda kept that feel, kept that look, because so often when I know for me, when I'm reading a fantasy book, everything feels kind of cloudy and blurred. And
mhm.
so these little clips have felt so close to how my imagination has felt. And this one I felt was like closest to what I had been able to kind of create in my head for this story. And it just hit like it hit me so hard because it felt so authentic to Wheel of Time.
Yeah, I really like the architecture that they've made for Manetheren for the castle. It's very similar to a lot of the fan art that I've seen, which I think is really cool that they
Yep.
probably went through and looked at
Mhm.
what other people had made and decided to
Yep.
kind of take a little bit from it.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful. Like, look at Queen Eldrine.
Mhm.
She's even got this necklace that resembles like feathers.
Yep.
It's beautiful.
Everything ab
Beautiful.
everything about this, I just thought was so well done. This display of power coming through her, the just the swords in the ground and the shield, and then just that
Mhm.
destruction blasting through it. It was just so I was like, "Yes." You know how, like, you imagine something and then you see it for, like, real, real, and you're like, "Wow, that's really real, real."
I have to say that when this bonus clip went live, I wasn't sure what to expect, and
Mhm.
the first, second of the bird flying across the castle, I guess, like, it got me, it pulled me in, and I was like,
Yep.
"These are great. These
They're
are
so
great."
good. There's so much
Yes.
attention that's been given to these, and I mean, I think that's one of the things that keeps me really excited about the show is there's just the bonus content for this show makes me love the show almost more than the show does. I don't know how that makes sense, but that behind the scenes, the love, the attention, the
Yeah.
appreciation that's given to so much of this, like, this series is going to be so much of a conversation starter in so many ways. And I think it's so much easier for new people to kind of appreciate it when it comes through like this. Yeah, I feel like it speaks to the Wheel of Time community as a whole, like who we've been for a long time, if you will, this beautiful layered world that's kind of overlaid our own worlds in a way and
Mhm.
getting to see it and all of this attention to detail, it just it makes my heart swell with happiness, like, for fucking real.
Do you wanna talk a little bit more about Tetsuan?
The thing about Tetsuan that I think is kind of important to know is that she was of the Red Aja. If I'm not mistaken, she was deposed.
Yes,
Yes, so she was one of what, 3
I think
deposed
3.
Amaryllis? And I also think her betrayal of Manetheren was what began the rift between the Reds and the Blue Ajas in the tower. Is that is that right?
It might be. I would have to double check,
I
but
would too.
the
Someone who knows, tell me, please,
yeah.
because it could be wrong, but I'm fairly
Listeners,
certain that
let us know in the comments.
yeah, I feel as though that rift has lasted for about 2,000 years, and so that would put it at about the right
It's
time frame.
it's still going on in the tower.
Yeah, yeah,
The
it's
reds and
still
the
happening.
blues just do not.
They just do not, which is really unfortunate because they could make a lovely purple.
Well, we are going to see more of the White Tower, so maybe
Mhm.
we'll get a little bit more of the inner workings. Maybe we'll see some of that red versus blue drama. I'm
I'm
hoping for
looking
it.
me too. It's definitely been alluded to in the way that Moraine has talked about what Nynaeve
Mhm,
should expect from the White Tower
mhm.
and how there are undercurrents within undercurrents
Yes,
within.
yes, yes.
It's just a big swirly, you can easily get caught up in it and destroyed. And I think that that's a valuable warning, but I
Mhm.
also feel like Nynaeve is she's fairly savvy. She'll get there. She'll be fine.
Yeah,
Um,
here's hoping.
but the fact that Tetsuan was left out of this, I can understand for time reasons. I mean, this clip is 2.5 minutes long, and I don't know how they would have worked that in. To me, this feels much more like a story of love and loss than it is about betrayal necessarily. Like, that
Mhm,
doesn't feel like the main focus. I like that Manetheren is brought into the TV series, and it also has its connection to Shadar, like you mentioned we had already seen.
mhm,
I wanted to ask you a question. When he picks up, I'm assuming this is a young boy who's picking this up out of the
mhm.
river. When I first watched it, I kinda had to, like, watch it a few times because to me, it almost looked as though there was a swirl of a dragon in the water, but I think it was just my imagination. I just thought it would be interesting if they left, like, a little whisper of what is to come with what has been found.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah.
that's a good point, yeah.
And I mean, the way that they, like, set this up to be, like, these flashes of these fast scenes while all of this stuff is happening, like,
Some of these were
I love
very
it.
hard to see because they were flashes that happened so fast
Mhm.
that if you blink, you
It
wouldn't
was
even see it.
yeah. It was and you
This is
know
just
what?
beautiful. It's just beautiful. Look at his crown.
I
Oh,
know.
his
Everything
crown.
about it is just
She's it resembles like the plumage of a bird, like her neck piece, kind of.
there's just something really dramatic when, like, hair is like that, in
Getting
my
blown by the
personal
wind.
opinion. Yeah, yeah. Oh, and also, this is a moment of foreshadowing as well,
It's good to know what happens when you lose someone through the water bond,
and you're an incredibly powerful channeler.
regardless if you're a channeler or not. If Queen Eldrine would have died, King Aemon would have went berserk,
Mm. Yes, yeah.
or as we're seeing it in the TV show, in Stepan's case, just becoming very lost in himself and committing suicide. But there are many ways that when you lose someone through the water bond, it can affect people in different ways, but it seems like the main two seem to be rage or
Mhm.
immense grief and loss to the point where you just kill yourself.
Yeah, it's self-destruct mode on
Yeah.
both ends, it feels like.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a moment in the books later on where an Aes Sedai talks about the loss of her warder, and I believe she says something along the lines of she tore her sheets to shreds every night in grief for months. Like,
That's how intense
yeah, I
it is.
yeah, and I really I like how much of the Water Bond we're getting in the TV show. I think that there are so many areas of
Oh,
relationships that are being explored, and I just am gobbling it up like Goosement.
one
Sorry.
last little thing I was thinking about is since the Two Rivers is the place that was rebuilt after the fall of Manetheren, it shares the same ground. So there are landmarks
Mhm,
that are even named after Queen Eldrine.
mhm,
And I believe in the first episode of The Wheel of Time, when you get to see Emond's Field or the Two Rivers, as they're calling it,
mhm,
you can actually see one of the waterfalls in the background, and it's
mhm,
called Eldrine's Vale. And this
mhm.
is something that I've butchered the name of saying.
You did
Listen,
beautifully today. You did
yeah,
beautifully.
listen to our podcast if you want to hear me not be able to talk. Manetheren episode is great for that,
Oh my
Santi.
gosh. Thanks. Oh my gosh.
Even the wine spring itself is this underground kind of, what would you, it's a spring where
It's a
like
spring.
where the
Mhm,
water comes up from deep below the surface.
mhm.
And who's to say if when Queen Eldrine went supernova,
Supernova. It's
the ground just didn't, broke open and the spring
mhm.
became what it is today. And
Yeah.
I believe that's what we saw, what Nynaeve was cleaning in that episode.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
thinking. I think it's just a
Mhm.
spring, now it's in a cave. So,
Well, she does refer to it as a sacred place.
yeah,
So, there is a possibility that, like
they've kind of changed it a little bit.
yeah, like, it remains a place that has its own level of sanctity, but
Mhm.
the exact definition and cause of it has been lost.
Yeah.
So, it could
Um,
be. So, as you mentioned, the eagles are the red eagle is the symbol of Manetheren, and ravens are agents of the Dark One,
yes.
can be. And we see a lot of really suspicious raven activity, especially at the beginning of Eye of the World. There's even like a chapter that was brought in after the first books were written that's titled Ravens. It's very good and I enjoyed it very much. Um, However, that is why I at first thought ravens was just
Mhm.
how heavily they're used at the beginning of the book. I didn't even think eagles, so I'm glad that you did.
Are you team eagle or team raven?
Well, oddly enough, I'm team eagle now, so I much prefer that imagery because
Mm.
it's more hopeful than it is
And I just
darkness descending, which is how I feel about the ravens.
and I think with that, we say goodbye.
We say goodbye.
Okay, we say goodbye.
Go read
Like,
News.
comment,
Go read Eye of the World.
go pick up Eye of the World if
Your
you're liking